Have you ever discovered that the person standing right in front of you was connected to your life in ways you never imagined? My name is Nathan Blackwell, and I thought I knew everything about grief. I thought I understood loss the way a man understands the weight of his own bones, the rhythm of his own heartbeat, the sound of his own breath in the darkness. But I was wrong. I knew nothing about the threads that connect us, about the secrets that bind strangers together, about the miracles that hide in plain sight, waiting patiently to be discovered. It had been 2 years since Claire died. 2 years since I watched the light leave her eyes in that sterile hospital room, her hand growing cold in mine while our 5-year-old daughter slept in the waiting room down the hall, clutching a stuffed rabbit and dreaming innocent dreams, completely oblivious to the fact that her world was ending. 2 years of waking up in a bed that felt too large, too cold, too empty. 2 years of setting the table for 3 out of habit, then staring at the empty chair where she used to sit, her morning coffee growing cold while she told me about her plans for the day. 2 years of catching myself turning to share something with a woman who was no longer there, reaching for a hand that had dissolved into memory. I was 41 years old, the CEO of Blackwell Architecture, a firm my grandfather had built from nothing in the years after World War II, and my father had grown into an empire that stretched across the Pacific Northwest. I had more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes, a penthouse apartment overlooking the Seattle skyline with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the Olympic Mountains, a corner office with views of Puget Sound, and a hollow space in my chest where my heart used to be. People told me I would heal. They said time would make it easier. They promised that one day I would wake up and the grief would not be the first thing I felt, would not be the weight that pressed me down into the mattress and made getting out of bed feel like climbing a mountain. They lied. Or maybe they did not lie, but simply did not understand that some wounds do not heal. They just become part of you, scar tissue that you learn to live with, pain that you carry so long it starts to feel like home. And then Elena walked into my life. She came to us in November, when the rain had been falling for 17 days straight, and the gray Seattle sky seemed to press down on the city like a suffocating blanket. The kind of rain that seeps into your bones and makes you forget that the sun ever existed. That warmth was ever real. My previous housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, had retired after 20 years of loyal service. She had been with us since before Sophie was born, had helped Claire through the difficult early days of motherhood, had been a constant presence in a house that desperately needed constance. When she told me she was leaving, I felt another piece of my foundation crumble. Not because I could not hire a replacement, but because Mrs. Patterson was a connection to Claire, to the life we had built together, to the time before everything fell apart. Every person who left took a piece of Claire with them, and I was running out of pieces. My assistant, Margaret, had hired the replacement through an agency, handling all the interviews and background checks while I buried myself in work, as I always did, using spreadsheets and blueprints and client meetings as shields against the relentless assault of my own emotions. I barely glanced at the paperwork she presented. I barely glanced at anything those days. My eyes were open, but I had stopped truly seeing the world around me. I remember the first time I saw Elena. It was a Monday morning, grey and drizzling, and I had come down to the kitchen early because Sophie had been having nightmares again, and neither of us had slept well. I was standing at the coffee maker, watching the dark liquid drip into the pot with the fascination of a man who has forgotten how to be interested in anything, when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, expecting Margaret, or perhaps the delivery person from the dry cleaner. Instead, I found a woman I had never seen before, standing in my kitchen. She was maybe 30 years old, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail that revealed the graceful line of her neck. She wore a modest blue dress that hung loosely on her frame, and it took me a moment to notice the gentle swell of her belly beneath the fabric. She was pregnant, maybe 6 months along, though I tried not to stare. Her skin was the color of warm honey, a rich golden brown that spoke of afternoons in the sun. And when she turned to greet me, I noticed her eyes first. They were the deepest brown I had ever seen, like coffee without cream, like the richest earth after a spring rain. And there was something in them, a depth that seemed to go on forever, a knowing that unsettled me, something that made me uncomfortable in ways I could not name, as if those eyes could see past all my carefully constructed walls and find the broken man hiding behind them. "Mr. Blackwell," she said, and her voice carried the faintest trace of an accent I could not place, Spanish perhaps, or Portuguese, softened by years of living in America. "I'm Elena Reyes. I will be taking care of your home." I nodded, said something appropriate about schedules and expectations, mentioned that Sophie had allergies to certain cleaning products, and that the fourth bedroom on the left was not to be entered because it was Claire's studio, and I was not ready to deal with that yet, and retreated to my study. That was the extent of our interaction for the first few weeks. She was efficient and invisible, the way good housekeepers are supposed to be. The house had never been cleaner. The laundry was always done, folded with a precision that bordered on artistic. Meals appeared in the refrigerator with reheating instructions written in her careful, elegant handwriting. She seemed to anticipate needs I did not know I had. A vase of fresh flowers appeared on the dining table every Monday, even though no one had done that since Claire died. The coffee maker was always clean and filled when I came down in the morning. Sophie's favorite snacks were always in the pantry, restocked without my ever having to ask. But Elena herself remained a mystery. She arrived precisely at 8 every morning and left precisely at 6 every evening, and what she did during the hours in between her work remained unknown to me. She never took personal calls that I heard. She never mentioned family or friends. She moved through the house like a ghost, leaving only cleanliness and order in her wake. And then my daughter noticed her. Sophie had been struggling since Claire died. That is an understatement. Sophie had been drowning, gasping for air in a world that had suddenly become too large and too frightening. She had stopped singing, stopped painting, stopped doing all the things that used to bring her joy. She moved through life like a small ghost herself, going through the motions of childhood without any of the substance. Her teachers called me in for meetings, their faces creased with concern, speaking in careful language about regression and withdrawal, and the importance of professional help. Her therapist, Dr. Chen, was concerned. She met with Sophie twice a week, and then with me once a month, and at each of our meetings, she would look at me with those kind, patient eyes and ask if I was taking care of myself, if I was making time for Sophie, beyond the basic logistics of meals and bedtimes and school drop-offs. I always said yes, and I always lied. I was terrified for my daughter, but I did not know how to reach her. Every time I looked at her, I saw Claire. The same blonde hair, fine and silky, that caught the light and turned to gold. The same green eyes, bright as spring leaves, that crinkled at the corners when she laughed. The same stubborn tilt of her chin when she was determined to get her way. Looking at Sophie was both a comfort and a knife in my chest. She was the last piece of Claire I had, and I was failing her. But with Elena, something shifted. I came home early one afternoon in December, 3 weeks after Elena had started. There had been a water main break near the office, and all the buildings in the area had been evacuated. I had intended to work from my study at home to bury myself in the Hendrix project that was running behind schedule and giving me sleepless nights. But when I stepped out of the elevator into the penthouse foyer, I heard something that stopped me in my tracks. Laughter. Sophie's laughter. High and bright and musical, ringing out from the kitchen like bells on a clear winter morning. I stood in the hallway, frozen, afraid that if I moved, I would break whatever spell had been cast. I had not heard my daughter laugh like that in 2 years. Not since before Claire went into the hospital for what we thought was a routine procedure. Before the complications, before the words, "There's nothing more we can do," shattered our lives into a million pieces. "And then what happened?" Sophie was asking, her voice breathless with anticipation. "And then the little rabbit said to the moon, 'You cannot catch me, because I am made of starlight,'" Elena replied. And I could hear the smile in her voice, warm and gentle. "And he jumped so high that he landed right on the moon's nose. And the moon was so surprised that he sneezed, and the sneeze blew the little rabbit all the way to a distant star where he made friends with a princess made of moonbeams." Sophie giggled again, that beautiful sound that I had feared I would never hear again. "That's silly! Moons can't sneeze!" "Well, this was a very special moon," Elena said. a moon that believed in impossible things. And when you believe in impossible things, sometimes they become possible. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself, my eyes burning with tears I refused to let fall. "Elena," Sophie said, and her voice had shifted, become smaller and more uncertain. "Do you think my mommy can see the moon from heaven?" There was a pause. I held my breath. "I think your mommy can see everything from heaven," Elena said gently, and there was something in her voice, a depth of conviction that surprised me. "I think she watches over you every single day. And every time you smile, it makes her so happy that she tells all the angels about her beautiful, brave daughter. She says, 'That's my Sophie. Look at how strong she is. Look at how she keeps going, even when it's hard.'" I heard Sophie sniffle, and then the soft rustle of fabric that suggested an embrace. "My daddy never talks about her anymore," Sophie whispered, and the words hit me like a physical blow. "I think it makes him too sad." "Sometimes," Elena said, "when we love someone very much, talking about them feels like touching a wound that hasn't healed yet. It hurts too much, even though we want to remember, even though we know it's important. But that doesn't mean your daddy doesn't think about her. I bet he thinks about her all the time. I bet he sees her face when he looks at you, because you have her eyes, you know, the same beautiful green eyes. How do you know what color my mommy's eyes were?" Another pause, a beat too long. "I saw pictures," Elena said smoothly. "The ones in the hallway. She was very beautiful, your mommy. You look just like her." I stepped back from the doorway, retreating to my study before they could discover me eavesdropping. I sat at my desk, staring at nothing, while something cracked open inside my chest. For the first time in 2 years, I let myself feel the full weight of what I had lost. Not just Claire, but Sophie too. I had been so consumed by my own grief, so focused on simply surviving each day, that I had failed to notice my daughter drowning in hers. That night, I did something I had not done in months. I read Sophie a bedtime story. I chose one of Claire's favorites, a worn paperback about a princess who learned that true strength came from kindness rather than swords. Claire used to do all the voices, changing her pitch and accent for each character, making Sophie squeal with delight. I was not as good at the voices, but I tried. I stumbled through the story, feeling clumsy and inadequate, watching Sophie's face for signs of disappointment. Instead, I found hope. Her eyes lit up in a way I had not seen in so long. She snuggled closer to me, her small body warm against my side, and listened with rapt attention. She fell asleep halfway through, her hand clutching mine, her breath evening out into the rhythm of deep, peaceful slumber. I stayed there for an hour, watching her breathe, making silent promises to do better, to be present, to stop hiding behind my work and my grief and my fear, to be the father she needed me to be. The weeks that followed brought small changes. I started coming home earlier, leaving the office at 5 instead of 8, delegating tasks I used to insist on handling myself. I ate dinner with Sophie instead of working through meals, sitting at the kitchen table while she told me about her day, about the boy in her class who picked his nose, about the book her teacher was reading them, about the bird she saw outside her window that morning. I asked her about school, about her friends, about the dreams she had at night. I learned that she had a best friend named Maya who shared her animal crackers at lunch, that she wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up because she wanted to help sick animals feel better, that she dreamed about flying sometimes and woke up disappointed that she could not really float above the clouds. And through it all, Elena moved through our house like a gentle current, never intruding, but always present. Her quiet competence created a sense of order that I had not realized we needed. She anticipated our needs without being asked. She made the house feel like a home again, not through grand gestures, but through countless small acts of care. I found myself noticing things about her, the way she hummed while she worked, soft melodies that seemed to come from somewhere far away, songs I did not recognize, but that made me feel oddly peaceful. The way she touched her belly when she thought no one was looking, her face softening with a tenderness that made my throat tight. The way she always seemed to know what Sophie needed, whether it was a glass of warm milk, or a listening ear, or a story about rabbits jumping on the moon. I also noticed that she was alone. There was no ring on her finger, no tan line suggesting one had recently been removed. No mention of a husband, or a boyfriend, or a baby's father. No one ever called for her, and she never took personal calls during work hours. Her phone, which she kept in her purse in the entryway closet, never buzzed with messages that I could hear. She arrived precisely at 8 every morning and left precisely at 6 every evening. And what she did during the hours in between remained a mystery. I told myself it was none of my business. She was my employee, nothing more. Her personal life was her own, and I had no right to pry. I was her boss, and she was a pregnant woman navigating whatever circumstances had led her to work as a housekeeper while expecting a child. The appropriate thing to do was respect her privacy, maintain professional boundaries, and focus on providing a fair work environment. But the curiosity gnawed at me. At night, when the apartment was silent and sleep refused to come, I found myself thinking about those deep brown eyes, about the sadness that flickered there sometimes, quickly hidden behind a professional smile, about the way she touched her belly, protective and tender, as if the child growing inside her was the most precious thing in the world. Who was Elena Reyes? Where had she come from? And why did I feel, inexplicably, that our paths had crossed before, that there was some connection between us that I could not see? It was Sophie who first asked the question I had been avoiding. "Elena, where is your baby's daddy?" We were at the breakfast table on a Saturday morning. Elena had come in early to help with a dinner party I was hosting that evening for potential investors. And she had made us all pancakes shaped like stars, something she had started doing after Sophie mentioned that Claire used to make her star-shaped pancakes on special occasions. The question hung in the air, blunt and innocent in the way only children can be. I looked up from my coffee, watching Elena's face carefully, ready to intervene if the question had caused offense. Elena did not flinch. She set down the spatula she was holding and turned to face Sophie with the same calm, patient expression she always wore. "He's not here anymore," she said simply. There was no bitterness in her voice, no anger or resentment, only a quiet acceptance, as if she was stating a simple fact about the weather. But that's okay. Some babies only need one parent to love them, and I have more than enough love for this little one. She touched her belly gently. "She's going to be very loved, even if it's just me." Sophie considered this with the seriousness that only children possess. Her brow furrowed, and I could see her working through the information, fitting it into her understanding of the world. "My daddy only has one parent now, too," she said finally. "Because my mommy went to heaven." "That's true," Elena agreed. "Maybe you could be friends," Sophie said. "You and Daddy, because you're both alone, and being alone is sad. Mommy used to say that everyone needs someone to share their heart with." Elena's eyes met mine across the table, and something passed between us. A recognition, perhaps. An acknowledgement that we were both navigating the same treacherous waters, both trying to build something from the wreckage of what we had lost. "Maybe," Elena said softly, and returned to the stove. I watched her back as she worked, the curve of her shoulders, the graceful way she moved despite her pregnancy. Sophie's words echoed in my mind. Maybe you could be friends. Such a simple idea. And yet the thought of friendship with anyone, of opening myself up to another person, felt terrifying. I had learned the cost of caring, the price of love. I was not sure I could afford to pay it again. But there was something about Elena that drew me in despite my resistance. A kindness in the way she treated Sophie, a gentleness in her movements, a depth in her eyes that suggested she understood pain in a way that most people did not. That night, after the dinner party was over and the investors had gone home impressed and likely to sign on, I could not sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Elena's eyes when Sophie asked about the baby's father. There had been no sadness there, I realized, no longing, no regret. Just acceptance and something else. Something that looked almost like peace. Who was this woman? What had she survived to achieve that kind of serenity? And why did the mystery of her feel so urgent, so personal, as if unlocking her secrets would somehow unlock my own? The question became an obsession. I found myself watching her more closely, cataloguing every detail, searching for clues to the mystery she represented. I noticed that she wore a small silver locket around her neck, always tucked beneath her collar, and that sometimes she touched it absently, the way a believer might touch a religious medal. The locket was clearly important to her, but she never opened it in my presence, never spoke of what was inside. I noticed that she never ate lunch, only drank a cup of tea, and that she always brought her own tea bags from home, refusing the expensive brands I stocked in the pantry. They were cheap bags, the kind sold in bulk at discount stores, but she handled them with care, as if they held meaning beyond their monetary value. I noticed that she spoke to Sophie differently than she spoke to me. With my daughter, she was warm and open, her face animated, her voice musical with the rise and fall of storytelling. With me, she was always polite but guarded, as if she were holding something back, building walls that kept me at a safe distance. And I noticed that every Wednesday, without fail, she asked to leave an hour early. The first few times, I did not think much of it. Doctor's appointments, I assumed. She was pregnant. After all, prenatal checkups, blood tests, ultrasounds. All perfectly normal and expected. But the pattern continued, week after week, even as she moved into her third trimester, even as the appointments should have become less frequent rather than more. There was something about the way she asked that bothered me, a tightness in her voice, an urgency that seemed disproportionate to a routine medical visit. She always phrased it the same way. "Mr. Blackwell, would it be possible for me to leave at 5 today instead of 6? I have an appointment I cannot miss." I always said yes. Of course I said yes. I was not the kind of employer who quibbled over an hour here or there, especially with a pregnant employee. But each time I agreed, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Relief, yes, but also something else. Guilt. I told myself not to follow her. I told myself it was invasive, inappropriate, the behavior of a man with no boundaries. I told myself that whatever secrets she kept were her own, and I had no right to uncover them. But on the first Wednesday of February, I followed her anyway. I am not proud of what I did. Even now, years later, I feel a flush of shame when I think about it. But that shame is tempered by the knowledge of what I discovered, by the understanding that sometimes the wrong action leads to the right destination. I waited until Elena left the apartment, her coat pulled tight against the February cold, her belly large enough now that her movements had slowed, become more careful. She took the elevator down to the parking garage while I pretended to be absorbed in paperwork. Then I grabbed my own coat and took the private elevator, moving quickly to reach my car before she pulled out. I followed her at a distance, my hands tight on the steering wheel, my conscience screaming at me to turn around. She drove a modest Honda Civic, at least 10 years old. Silver paint faded and scratched in places. She drove carefully, obeying every speed limit, signaling every turn, the model of responsible driving. She took the I-90 east, away from the city, toward the suburbs. The rain had stopped for once, and weak winter sunlight filtered through the clouds, casting long shadows across the highway. I stayed 3 cars behind her, feeling like a criminal, like a man who had lost all sense of himself. After 40 minutes, she exited the highway and wound through a quiet residential neighborhood. The houses here were modest but well-maintained, with neat yards full of bare trees waiting for spring, American flags hanging from porches, children's bicycles leaning against garage doors. It was the kind of neighborhood Claire and I had talked about moving to someday, when the city became too crowded, when we wanted space for Sophie to run and play. Elena pulled into the parking lot of a small cemetery, and my heart stopped. I parked across the street, hidden behind a delivery truck that was unloading packages at a neighboring house, and watched her get out of her car. She moved slowly, one hand on her belly for balance, the other carrying a small bouquet of white roses. She walked through the iron gates and disappeared among the headstones. I waited. 10 minutes. 20. 30. Finally, I could not stand it anymore. I got out of my car and crossed the street, my expensive shoes sinking into the soft ground of the cemetery. I entered through the iron gates, following the path she had taken, my heart pounding in my chest. The cemetery was quiet, peaceful, the kind of place where grief could breathe without judgment. Rows of headstones stretched in orderly lines, some ornate with angels and crosses, others simple granite slabs with names and dates. I moved quietly, keeping to the shadows until I saw her. She was kneeling in front of a grave, her head bowed, the white roses placed carefully at the base of the headstone. Her lips were moving, but I was too far away to hear what she was saying. I crept closer, hiding behind a large oak tree whose bare branches stretched toward the grey sky like skeletal fingers. And then I read the name on the stone, Claire Elizabeth Blackwell. The world tilted on its axis. My wife's grave. Elena was visiting my wife's grave. I gripped the tree trunk to keep from falling, my knees suddenly weak, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, trying to find some logical explanation for the impossible scene before me. Elena had never mentioned knowing Claire. She had never given any indication that their lives had intersected before she came to work for me. So why was she here, kneeling in the mud, placing flowers at my wife's grave, talking to Claire like an old friend? I watched as Elena reached out and touched the headstone, her fingers tracing the letters of Claire's name. Then she pulled something from beneath her collar. The silver locket. She opened it, looked at whatever was inside, and pressed it to her lips. "I'm taking care of them," she said, and her voice carried across the silent cemetery, clear enough now for me to hear. "Just like I promised. Just like I said I would." My heart stopped. "He's a good man, Claire. You were right about that. Better than he knows. He's carrying so much pain. But I can see the love underneath it, the way he looks at Sophie, the way he's trying so hard to be what she needs." She paused, touched her belly. "And Sophie. Oh, Sophie is so beautiful. She has your smile, you know. That same smile that lights up a room. She's going to be okay. I'm going to make sure of it." I could not breathe. I could not think. I could not do anything but stand there, frozen behind that oak tree, while the pieces of a puzzle I did not know existed began to fall into place. Elena stood slowly, one hand on her lower back, the other resting on her belly. "I'll bring the baby to meet you when she's born," she said. "I think you would have liked her name. I'm calling her Claire, Claire Sophia Reyes." She smiled through tears I had not noticed before. "I hope that's okay. I hope you don't mind me borrowing your name. It's just that I owe you everything, and I wanted her to carry that, to carry you." She turned then, and for a terrible moment I thought she would see me. But her eyes were fixed on the path ahead, and she walked past the oak tree without glancing in my direction. I waited until I heard her car start, until the sound of her engine faded into the distance, and then I stumbled to my wife's grave and collapsed to my knees. The headstone stared back at me, cold and unyielding. Claire Elizabeth Blackwell, beloved wife and mother, the light of our lives. 1982, 2022. I stayed at the cemetery until the sun began to set, my mind spinning in circles, my heart aching with a pain I could not name. 1,000 questions tumbled through my head, but one rose above all others. What was Elena's connection to Claire? How had they known each other? And why had Elena never told me? When I finally drove home, Sophie was already asleep, and Elena had left for the day. The apartment felt emptier than it had in months, the silence pressing in on me from all sides. I poured myself a whiskey and sat in the dark, staring out at the city lights, trying to make sense of the impossible. I did not confront Elena the next day, or the day after that. I watched her move through the house, caring for my daughter and my home with the same quiet efficiency she had always shown, and I searched for some sign of what I had witnessed. A crack in the facade, a slip of the tongue, something that would confirm what I had seen was real and not some grief-induced hallucination. But she gave nothing away. She was the same Elena she had always been, polite, professional, kind to Sophie, distant with me. The secret burned inside me like a coal. I began researching, staying up late into the night, combing through every record I could access. I started with Claire's old emails, thousands of messages spanning years, searching for any mention of Elena Reyes. I found nothing. I moved to her social media accounts, scrolling through photos and posts and comments, looking for a face or a name that matched. Nothing. I checked her volunteer records, the charities she supported, the organizations she belonged to. Nothing. The connection had to exist. I had seen Elena at Claire's grave. I had heard her speak as if she knew my wife. But where? I contacted the agency that had placed Elena in my home and asked for her complete file. Her references checked out. Her background was clean. She had worked for 3 other families before us, all of whom had given glowing recommendations. Nothing unusual. Nothing that explained why she would be visiting my wife's grave every Wednesday like a pilgrim to a holy site. I thought about hiring a private investigator. I actually made the call, spoke to a bored-sounding woman who promised results in 48 hours, and then hung up before she could take my payment. I was ashamed of how far I was willing to go, ashamed of the obsession that was consuming me. And then, one night, I found it. It was buried in Claire's old email archives, in a folder labeled medical that I had never thought to check. I had been so focused on her personal communications, her friends and colleagues and acquaintances, that I had overlooked the mundane administrative emails that make up so much of modern life. The message was from Swedish Medical Center, dated 7 years ago. Dear Mrs. Blackwell, thank you for your generous blood donation. Your contribution has helped save a life today. We cannot share patient information due to privacy regulations, but please know that your selfless act has made a tremendous difference. A young woman who suffered severe blood loss following a car accident is now in stable condition thanks to donors like you. I sat back in my chair, my heart pounding. 7 years ago. A car accident. Severe blood loss. I opened a new browser window and searched for news stories from that time period. It took me an hour, sifting through archives and local news sites, but I finally found it. A hit and run on the Aurora Bridge. A 23-year-old woman, 6 months pregnant, struck by a drunk driver who fled the scene. She had been walking home from work, crossing at a marked crosswalk, when a car jumped the curb and hit her at full speed. She had been rushed to Swedish Medical Center, where doctors worked through the night to save her life. The baby had been stillborn. The woman's name was Elena Maria Reyes. I read the article 3 times, then 4, then 5. Each time the facts remained the same. Elena had nearly died. She had lost her baby. And Claire, my Claire, had been at the hospital that day for a routine prenatal checkup, had heard the announcement on the PA system asking for blood donors with her rare type, and had rolled up her sleeve without hesitation. Claire had saved Elena's life. The realization hit me like a wave, knocking the breath from my lungs. Everything made sense now. The locket, the visits to the cemetery, the way Elena looked at Sophie with such tenderness, such care. She was not just a housekeeper, she was not just a stranger who had wandered into our lives by chance. She was a woman repaying a debt that could never truly be repaid. She had taken this job not for the money, not for the convenience of working in a nice home. She had taken it for the chance to give back something, anything, to the family of the woman who had given her a second chance at life. I closed my laptop and sat in the darkness, tears streaming down my face for the first time in 2 years. The next morning, I woke before dawn. I had not slept more than an hour, my mind too full of questions and revelations to find rest. I went for a walk through the city streets, the rain falling in a light mist, the first joggers of the day appearing on the sidewalks with their earbuds and their determined faces. I walked for hours, trying to process what I had learned, trying to decide what to do. Should I confront Elena? Demand to know why she had kept this secret? Or should I let the mystery remain, allow her to continue her quiet mission of repayment without the awkwardness of acknowledgement? By the time I returned to the apartment, I had made my decision. The secret was not mine to expose. Elena had her reasons for keeping silent, and those reasons were valid. She had found her own way to honor Claire's memory, to thank a woman she had never met for the gift of continued existence. Who was I to interfere with that? But something had changed inside me. The wall I had built around my heart, so carefully constructed over 2 years of grief and isolation, had developed cracks. Light was beginning to seep through, warming places that had been frozen for too long. Elena was in the kitchen when I came through the door, making breakfast as she always did. Sophie was at the table, chattering about a dream she had had about flying horses who lived on clouds made of cotton candy. The scene was so normal, so domestic, so painfully beautiful that I had to stop in the doorway and collect myself. "Daddy," Sophie called out. "Elena made pancakes. She made them look like clouds this time, see? Because of my dream." I walked to the table and kissed the top of my daughter's head, breathing in the clean scent of her shampoo. Over her shoulder, I met Elena's eyes. "Thank you," I said, and the words carried more weight than she could possibly know. Something flickered in her expression. Confusion, perhaps, or suspicion. Her hands paused in their work, a spatula frozen in mid-air. "It's just pancakes, Mr. Blackwell." "Not for the pancakes," I said. "For everything." She held my gaze for a long moment, searching my face for meaning. I could see the question in her eyes, the uncertainty, the fear that her secret had been discovered. But I gave nothing away. This was her truth to share, when and if she was ready. I would not force her hand. "The coffee's ready," she said finally, turning back to the stove. I left it on the counter. I did not push further. Not yet. I was not ready, and neither was she. But something had shifted between us, an invisible barrier beginning to crack. The days that followed were different. I found excuses to be home more often, to eat dinner at the table instead of in my study, to spend time in the common areas where Elena moved through her work. I watched her with new eyes, seeing not just the efficient housekeeper but the woman underneath, the survivor, the fighter, the person who had clawed her way back from tragedy and chosen to spend her life serving the family of her savior. And slowly, gradually, the walls between us began to come down. It started with small conversations. I asked about her day, and instead of giving a one-word answer, she told me about a funny thing Sophie had said, or a recipe she wanted to try. She asked about my work, and I found myself actually answering, sharing the frustrations and triumphs that I usually kept to myself. We talked about books, about music, about the rain that never seemed to stop. We talked about Seattle, about neighborhoods and restaurants, and the best place to find good tacos at midnight. We talked about everything, except the thing that mattered most. Sophie noticed the change before either of us did. "Daddy, do you like Elena?" she asked one evening, while I was tucking her into bed. Her green eyes, so like Claire's, studied my face with an intensity that was unsettling in a 6-year-old. "Of course I like Elena," I said carefully. "She takes very good care of us." "No, I mean like, Sophie said, with the impatience of a child who believes adults are remarkably slow. "Like how you liked Mommy, like in the movies, when people dance and kiss and get married." I was quiet for a long moment, not sure how to answer. The truth was, I did not know how I felt about Elena. I knew she had become important to me, that the days felt brighter when she was around, that I looked forward to our small conversations with an eagerness that surprised me. But was that was that love or something smaller, or something I was too damaged to recognize? "It's complicated, sweetheart." "Grown-ups always say that," Sophie sighed. Maya's mom says that too, when Maya asks why her parents don't live together anymore. But I don't think it's complicated. I think you either like someone, or you don't. I tucked the blanket more tightly around her. "You're very wise for a 6-year-old. "I know," she said matter-of-factly. "Elena says I'm old soul. That means I've lived before. Like in a different life, and that's why I understand things that other kids don't." "Elena told you that?" Sophie nodded. "She says lots of smart things. She knows about everything. About stars and animals and why the rain smells good and how to make pancakes shaped like anything you want." She paused, her face growing serious. "I think you should marry her, Daddy. Then she could be my new mommy, and her baby could be my sister, and we could be a real family again." The word hit me like a blow. Again. As if we had stopped being a family when Claire died. As if the two of us were just fragments of something that used to be whole. "Sophie, I asked Mommy about it," she continued, undeterred. "I asked her in my prayers. I said, 'Mommy, is it okay if Daddy loves someone else? I don't want you to be sad, and I don't want you to think I forgot about you. But Daddy's lonely, and Elena makes him smile. And I think she needs a family too, because she doesn't have anyone, And do you know what happened? What happened? A shooting star went across the sky, right outside my window, just when I finished asking. And Elena told me that shooting stars are angels sending messages from heaven. So I think Mommy said yes. I bent down and kissed her forehead, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. My daughter, my beautiful, perceptive daughter, who had lost so much and yet still believed in magic and shooting stars and the possibility of happiness. Go to sleep, little one, I managed. We'll talk more tomorrow. But as I closed her door, Sophie's words echoed in my mind. I had been so afraid of betraying Claire's memory, so convinced that loving someone else would somehow diminish what we had shared, that I had not stopped to consider what Claire would actually want. She had always been selfless. That was who she was, at her core. She volunteered at soup kitchens on her days off. She donated blood whenever she was eligible. She stopped to help strangers who looked lost, to comfort children who were crying in grocery stores, to feed stray cats that wandered into our yard. She had given so much of herself to so many people that when she died, the funeral home had been overflowing with mourners I did not recognize, all of them with stories about how Claire had touched their lives. Would she really want me to spend the rest of my days alone, drowning in grief, unable to open my heart again? I thought about the way she had looked at me on our wedding day, her eyes full of hope and promise. I thought about the last real conversation we had, the night before she went into the hospital. She had been tired and in pain, but she had taken my hand and looked at me with that same intensity Sophie had inherited. "Promise me something," she had said. "Anything. Promise me you'll be happy, even if I'm not here. Promise me you'll find a way to be happy." I had promised. I had held her hand and sworn that I would be happy, that I would take care of Sophie, that I would live a life worthy of her love. And then she had closed her eyes and gone to sleep, and 2 days later she was gone, and I had broken my promise. Elena was in the kitchen when I came downstairs, washing the dinner dishes by hand, even though we had a perfectly good dishwasher. She did that sometimes, I had noticed. Small acts of service that went beyond what was required of her, as if she was trying to earn something that she did not believe she deserved. "Can we talk?" I asked. She turned off the water and dried her hands, her expression guarded. The light from the window caught the silver locket at her throat. "Of course, Mr. Blackwell." "Nathan," I said. "Please, I've asked you before. Call me Nathan." She hesitated. There was a line we had never crossed. In professional distance she had maintained from the beginning. Using my first name felt like stepping over that line. "Nathan," she repeated finally, and my name sounded different in her voice. Softer. More intimate. I gestured to the living room, and she followed me, her hand resting on her belly, the way it always did when she was nervous. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, a careful distance between us that suddenly felt wrong, artificial, a barrier that no longer served its purpose. "I know," I said. Her face went pale. "Know what?" "I know about the accident. I know about Claire. I know why you're here." For a long moment, Elena did not move. She did not breathe. Her eyes were fixed on my face, searching for something, though I could not tell what. Then, slowly, she closed her eyes, and a single tear slipped down her cheek, followed by another. "How?" she whispered. "I followed you," I admitted, feeling the shame rise in my chest. "To the cemetery. Last month. I saw you at her grave." She opened her eyes, and I expected to see anger there, or betrayal. Instead, I saw something that looked like relief, as if she had been carrying a weight for so long that the thought of setting it down, even under these circumstances, was a comfort. "I wanted to tell you," she said. 100 times, 1,000 times I wanted to tell you. But I didn't know how. I didn't know if you would understand. I was afraid you would think I was crazy, or that I had some ulterior motive, or that I was trying to take advantage. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I was afraid you would send me away." "Tell me now," I said. "Tell me everything." And she did. She told me about the night of the accident, how she had been walking home from her job at a restaurant in Capitol Hill, tired from a double shift, her feet aching, her belly heavy with the child she had wanted so desperately. She had been crossing at Aurora and Westlake when a car came out of nowhere, jumping the curb, moving too fast for her to react. She remembered the impact, the feeling of flying, of hitting the ground. She remembered the pain, white-hot and all-consuming, and then nothing. She told me about waking up in the hospital 3 days later, alone and terrified. Her parents were dead, killed years earlier in a car accident of their own. The father of her baby, a man she had trusted, had abandoned her when she told him she was pregnant. She had no siblings, no close friends, no one to sit by her bedside and hold her hand. She told me about learning that her baby had not survived. A daughter, the doctor said. She had been going to name her Maria, after her mother. The loss had nearly destroyed her. She spent weeks in the hospital, recovering from her injuries, trying to find a reason to keep living. The nurses were kind, she said. They told me about the blood transfusion. How I had lost so much blood that they thought I was going to die. How they had put out a call for my rare type, and how a woman had come in that very day for a prenatal checkup and had volunteered immediately. Elena touched the locket at her throat. They couldn't tell me her name, privacy rules, but one of the nurses mentioned offhand that the donor was a young mother. That she had a little girl at home, that she had just smiled and rolled up her sleeve, as if saving a stranger's life was nothing special. She told me about the years that followed, the slow process of healing, physically and emotionally, the grief that never fully went away, but that gradually made room for other feelings. Hope, gratitude, a fierce determination to live a life worthy of the sacrifice someone had made to save her. I never forgot, she said. Every day, I thought about her, the woman who saved my life. I didn't know her name, didn't know her face, but I carried her with me everywhere. When I learned to walk again, I walked for her. When I got a new job, I worked for her. When I found reasons to smile, I smiled for her. She told me about the day she finally tracked down Claire's name. It had taken years, but she had been persistent, filing requests, following leads, until finally a sympathetic hospital employee had given her what she needed. Claire Elizabeth Blackwell. She had looked her up online, found pictures and news stories and social media posts, and had felt like she was meeting an old friend. She was so beautiful, Elena said, her voice breaking, and so kind. Everything I learned about her made me love her more. The charities she supported, the volunteer work she did, the way she smiled in photos like she knew a secret about happiness that the rest of us hadn't figured out yet. She told me about seeing the obituary 2 years ago, how she had been scrolling through her saved searches, something she did every few months just to feel close to the woman who had saved her. And there it was. Claire Elizabeth Blackwell, beloved wife and mother, had passed away. I felt like I had lost someone I loved, she said, even though we had never met, even though she didn't know I existed. I cried for a week. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I couldn't understand why the universe would take her, why someone so good, so generous, so full of life would be gone. She told me about the job listing, how she had seen it online months later and had recognized the name Blackwell immediately, how she had applied without thinking, without planning, driven by an impulse she couldn't explain, how she had been terrified during the interview, sure that someone would recognize her, would ask questions she couldn't answer. But no one did, she said. Your assistant hired me based on my references and my experience. She never asked why I wanted this particular job, why I had applied to only this one listing, why my hands shook when I walked through the door for the first time. Why did you want this job? I asked. I just wanted to help, she said. I just wanted to give back something, anything, to the family that had given me everything. I know it was wrong. I know I should have been honest from the start, but I was afraid you would turn me away, and I couldn't bear the thought of that. I couldn't bear the thought of walking away from her family, from the people she had loved, without doing something to repay what she had given me. I listened to her story, and I felt something shifting inside me. The anger I had expected to feel never came. Instead, there was only a deep, aching tenderness for this woman who had carried such a heavy secret for so long. The baby, I said, gesturing to her belly. Is that why you named her Claire? Elena nodded, fresh tears streaming down her face. I know it might seem strange or presumptuous, but I wanted my daughter to carry the name of the woman who made her possible. Without Claire, I wouldn't be here. This baby wouldn't exist. Everything good in my life traces back to a stranger who decided to donate blood on an ordinary Tuesday. She looked at me with those deep brown eyes. I hope that's okay. I hope you don't think it's wrong. I reached across the couch and took her hand. It was the first time I had touched her, really touched her, and the contact sent a jolt through my entire body. Her skin was warm, her fingers small and delicate in mine. It's not strange, I said. It's beautiful. She looked at me with those deep brown eyes, and I saw the question there, the uncertainty, the fear of rejection. I'm not angry, I said. I'm grateful. Grateful that Claire's last gift to the world was giving you a second chance. Grateful that you used that chance to help us. Grateful that you loved my wife enough to carry her memory with you, even though you never met her. Nathan, she breathed. I don't know what this is between us, I continued. I don't know what it could become. I've been so lost, Elena, so broken. I didn't think I would ever feel anything again. But when I'm with you, when I watch you with Sophie, when I hear your voice in this house. I trailed off, struggling to find the right words. It's like the sun is coming up after a very long night. Elena was crying openly now, and so was I. We sat there on the couch, our hands intertwined, in two broken people who had somehow found their way to each other through the labyrinth of grief and guilt and second chances. Claire would have loved you, I said. I know that with absolute certainty. She would have taken one look at you and known that you were good, that you were kind, that you were exactly the person our family needed. Do you really believe that? I know it. The way I know my own name, the way I know the sun will rise tomorrow. Claire sent you to us, Elena. I'm sure of it now. She squeezed my hand, and the relief in her face was like sunrise after a long night. What do we do now? She asked. We take it slow, I said. We get to know each other, really know each other without the secrets between us. We see where this goes, but we do it honestly. She nodded, and something in her posture changed. The tension she had carried for so long, the weight of her secret, seemed to lift from her shoulders. There's one more thing, I said. Sophie wants you to be her new mommy, she told me tonight. Elena laughed through her tears, a sound so pure and unexpected that it made my heart ache. She told me that too, she admitted. Last week, she said she asked your wife for permission, and a shooting star said yes. I thought of Claire, looking down on us from wherever she was now. I thought of her smile, her kindness, her endless capacity for love, and I knew, with a certainty that went beyond logic, that she was giving us her blessing. Then I guess we have her permission, I said. The months that followed were not easy. There were complications and misunderstandings, moments when old wounds reopened and new fears emerged. Elena worried that she was replacing Claire, that she was somehow dishonoring the memory of the woman who had saved her life by falling in love with her husband. I worried that I was moving too fast, that I was using Elena to fill the void Claire had left, that my feelings were born of grief rather than genuine connection. We talked about these fears late at night after Sophie was asleep, sitting on the couch where we had first held hands. We talked about Claire, about what she would want, about how to honor her memory while building something new. We talked about our own traumas, our own losses, the scars we carried that were invisible but no less real. And slowly, through those conversations, we healed each other. But not everyone was happy about our growing closeness. The first sign of trouble came from an unexpected source. I received a call from Dr. Chen, Sophie's therapist, requesting an urgent meeting. I arrived at her office the following day, my mind racing with possibilities. Had Sophie regressed? Had something happened that I was not aware of? Dr. Chen's office was warm and comfortable, filled with soft lighting and plants that seemed to thrive under her care. She gestured for me to sit and studied me with those kind, professional eyes. Mr. Blackwell, I wanted to discuss some changes I've observed in Sophie. My heart clenched. Is something wrong? On the contrary. She smiled, and the tension in my shoulders eased slightly. Sophie has made remarkable progress in the past few months. She's more engaged, more communicative, more willing to talk about her feelings. She's started painting again, something she had completely abandoned after her mother's death. That's wonderful. It is. But I wanted to ask you about the catalyst. Dr. Chen leaned forward. Sophie speaks quite frequently about a woman named Elena. She describes her with tremendous affection, and she credits Elena with many of the positive changes in her life. I understand Elena is your housekeeper. I shifted in my seat. She started as our housekeeper, yes, but she's become more than that, to all of us. I see. Dr. Chen's expression remained neutral, professionally non-judgmental. Sophie mentioned that Elena might become her new mommy. She seems very excited about this possibility. Sophie has expressed that hope, yes. And what are your feelings about it? I was quiet for a long moment. I care about Elena deeply. She's been good for Sophie, good for our family. She has a connection to Claire that makes this feel different, more meaningful than I can explain. Dr. Chen nodded slowly. Mr. Blackwell, I want to be clear that I'm not here to judge or interfere with your personal choices. You're a grown man, and you have every right to pursue happiness in whatever form it takes. But I am concerned about Sophie, and I want to ensure that any changes in her family structure are handled with care. Of course, so am I. Children who have lost a parent often struggle with feelings of loyalty. They may feel that loving someone new is a betrayal of the parent who died. They may fear that accepting a new parental figure means forgetting the old one. She paused. Sophie doesn't seem to be experiencing these conflicts, which is remarkable and speaks well of how you've handled the situation. But I would encourage you to move slowly, to give Sophie opportunities to express any complicated feelings she might have, and to ensure that Claire's memory remains honored, even as your family grows. That's exactly what we intend to do. Then I have no concerns. Dr. Chen smiled again. I've been working with grieving children for 20 years, Mr. Blackwell. I've seen many families try to move on after loss, and I've seen many of those attempts fail because the adults involved were too focused on their own needs to consider the children's. What I see in your family is different. What I see is healing. Real, genuine healing. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I left her office feeling lighter than I had in years. Professional validation from someone who had watched Sophie struggle and now watched her flourish. It felt like permission to continue on the path we had started. But that permission was about to be challenged. Margaret Blackwell, Claire's mother, arrived unannounced one March afternoon, letting herself in with the key Claire had given her years ago. She found Elena in the kitchen, making lunch for Sophie, and the look on her face could have frozen fire. "Who are you?" she demanded. "And what are you doing in my daughter's kitchen?" Elena, to her credit, remained calm. "I'm Elena Reyes, Mrs. Blackwell. I'm the housekeeper." Margaret's eyes swept over Elena's pregnant belly, her modest clothing, the comfortable way she moved through the space. "The housekeeper," she repeated, her voice dripping with disdain. "And where is my son-in-law?" "At work. He should be home in a few hours." Margaret did not wait a few hours. She called me immediately, her voice shaking with fury. "Nathan, I need you to come home right now. We need to talk about this woman you've installed in my daughter's house." I left work early, my stomach churning with anxiety. I had known this confrontation was coming. Margaret had never approved of me, had always thought Claire could have done better, and I had no illusions about how she would react to the news that I was developing feelings for someone new. She was waiting in the living room when I arrived, perched on the edge of the couch like a queen on her throne. Elena was nowhere to be seen, which was probably for the best. "How dare you!" Margaret said, before I could speak. "How dare you bring another woman into this house, into Claire's home?" "Margaret, she's been dead 2 years, Nathan, 2 years. And you've already replaced her with some pregnant girl you found God knows where. Elena is our housekeeper. She was hired through an agency, with excellent references and a clean background. I don't care about her references. I care about my granddaughter. I care about Claire's memory. I care about the fact that you're clearly planning to shack up with the help while my daughter's ashes are barely cold." The cruelty of her words stung, but I forced myself to remain calm. Margaret was grieving, in her own way. She had lost her only child, and the pain of that loss had turned her sharp and bitter. I had seen glimpses of this bitterness at the funeral. At Claire's memorial service, at the first anniversary when she had called me drunk at midnight and accused me of not loving her daughter enough. I had learned to recognize the grief beneath the anger. It did not make her words hurt any less, but it helped me understand them. Claire's ashes were scattered over the Sound 2 years ago, I said quietly, and I have nothing but respect for her memory. But Claire would not want me to spend the rest of my life alone. She told me herself before she died. She made me promise to be happy. Happy! Margaret spat the word like a curse. With the pregnant housekeeper, that's your idea of happiness? Elena is a good person. She cares about Sophie. She takes care of this home with a dedication that goes far beyond what she's paid to do. And yes, I have feelings for her. I'm not going to apologize for that. Margaret stood, her face contorted with anger. If you pursue this, if you bring that woman into this family, you will lose me. I will not sit by and watch you replace my daughter with some nobody. I'm not replacing Claire. No one could ever replace Claire. But I am choosing to live again, to love again, and if you can't accept that, then I'm sorry. Margaret left without another word, slamming the door behind her hard enough to rattle the windows. I stood in the empty living room, my hands shaking, and wondered if I had just made a terrible mistake. Elena found me an hour later, still standing in the same spot, staring at nothing. I heard, she said quietly. I was upstairs with Sophie. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but it's fine. She wasn't exactly being subtle. Elena came closer, placing her hand on my arm. Maybe she's right. Maybe this is too fast. Maybe I should. No. I turned to face her, taking both her hands in mine. Margaret is grieving. She's angry and she's scared and she's taking it out on me because I'm an easy target. But that doesn't mean she's right. It doesn't mean we should stop. She's Claire's mother. Her opinion matters. Claire's opinion matters more. And Claire would want me to be happy. She would want Sophie to have someone who loves her. She would want... I paused, struggling to find the words. She would want exactly what we're building, Elena. A family, a future, a second chance. Elena was silent for a long moment, her eyes searching my face. Are you sure? She asked finally. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. 3 months later, Elena moved in permanently. She had been staying in the guest room since her 7th month, her own apartment too far from the hospital where she was planning to deliver, and it had felt natural to make the arrangement permanent. Sophie was overjoyed, racing through the hallways, shouting that she was finally going to have a sister. Not yet, I reminded her. The baby isn't here yet. But soon, Sophie said. Elena said maybe next month, and then I'm going to teach her everything. How to draw clouds, how to make pancakes, how to talk to shooting stars. Baby Claire came on a Tuesday in June, arriving in a rush of water and pain, and finally, joy. She was small and perfect, with dark hair like her mother and green eyes that the nurses said might change but never did. When they placed her in Elena's arms, I saw something in her face that I had not seen since Claire died. Peace, complete and total peace. Hello, Claire, Elena whispered. I've been waiting for you. Sophie met her baby sister that afternoon, climbing onto the hospital bed with careful movements, her face solemn with the weight of the responsibility she felt. She's so tiny, Sophie said, touching Claire's hand with one finger. Was I this tiny when I was born? Even tinier, I said. You were early. You spent your first month in a special bed in the hospital, with tubes and wires keeping you safe. But I got better. You got better. You were a fighter. Sophie looked at the baby, her expression thoughtful. I'm going to be the best big sister ever, she announced. I'm going to teach her everything. And when she's bigger, I'll tell her about the other Claire, the one in heaven. I'll tell her how she saved our Elena, and how Elena saved us, and how we all became a family because of love. I looked at Elena, lying in the hospital bed with our daughter in her arms, and I felt something I had not felt in years. Complete. We were married the following spring. in a small ceremony in the garden of the estate where Claire and I had exchanged our vows 8 years earlier. It felt right to honor her memory that way, to bring our story full circle in the place where mine and Claire's had begun. Sophie was the flower girl, scattering rose petals with serious concentration. Baby Claire slept through the entire ceremony, nestled in the arms of Mrs. Patterson, who had come out of retirement for the occasion. Even Margaret came, in the end. The months had softened her, and the sight of Sophie so happy, so full of life again, had melted something in her frozen heart. She did not apologize for her earlier words, but she shook Elena's hand after the ceremony and told her that Claire would have approved. She was always bringing home strays, Margaret said, and though the words could have been an insult, her voice was gentle. Animals, people, anyone who needed help. She had a gift for seeing the good in people. I think she would have seen the good in you. At the reception, I slipped away to the corner of the garden where a small memorial plaque marked Claire's favorite spot. I had placed it there a year after her death, beneath the cherry tree where she used to read on summer afternoons. I hope you can see this, I said aloud. I hope you know how much I loved you and how much I still love you. I hope you know that Elena doesn't replace you. No one could ever replace you. I paused, watching a cherry blossom drift down from the branches above. But she carries your legacy forward, Claire. She gives us light when the darkness gets too heavy. She loves our daughter with her whole heart. She named her baby after you. A breeze stirred the branches of the cherry tree, and for a moment I could almost feel Claire's presence beside me. Thank you for saving her that day, I continued. Thank you for giving her a second chance, and in doing so, giving me one too. I'm going to take care of them, Claire. All of them, I promise. A hand slipped into mine, and I turned to find Elena standing beside me. She was wearing the simple white dress she had chosen for the wedding, and the silver locket still hung around her neck. She had opened it once to show me what was inside, a tiny photo of Claire, clipped from a newspaper article about a local charity event, and a single strand of blonde hair that Sophie had given her. She was here, Elena said softly, looking at the memorial plaque. I felt her during the ceremony. When we said our vows, there was this warmth that washed over me, like sunlight breaking through clouds. She's always here, I agreed. She always will be. We stood there together, hand in hand, honoring the woman who had brought us together. The woman whose single act of kindness had rippled outward through time, touching lives she never knew existed, creating a family she never got to meet. The years that followed were full of joy and challenge, of ordinary days and extraordinary moments. Sophie grew into a confident young woman, her early silence and sadness giving way to a vibrant personality full of curiosity and compassion. She became an artist, like her mother, filling canvases with color and light. She never forgot Claire, keeping photos of her throughout her dorm room in college, telling her roommates stories about the mother she had lost and the mother she had gained. Baby Claire grew into a toddler, then a child, then a teenager with her mother's dark hair and her namesake's green eyes. She was fierce and gentle in equal measure, a perfect blend of the two women who had shaped her existence. She wore her name with pride, knowing the full story by the time she was old enough to understand it. Elena and I had one more child together, a son we named Daniel, after my father. He was the unexpected gift that completed our family. Born when Claire was 3 and Sophie was 9. He had my eyes and Elena's smile, and an easygoing temperament that balanced out his sister's stronger personalities. We built a foundation in Claire's name, dedicated to ensuring that no hospital ever ran short of blood supplies. Elena became its face, telling her story to anyone who would listen, watching blood donation rates soar in our region. We funded mobile donation units, partnered with blood banks across the country, and launched awareness campaigns that saved countless lives. One act of kindness, Elena would say in her speeches. That's all it takes to change the world. Claire Blackwell never knew my name. She was just a woman who walked into a blood bank on an ordinary Tuesday and gave something of herself to someone she would never meet. And because of that, I am alive. My daughter is alive. My family exists. On the 10th anniversary of Claire's death, our entire family made the pilgrimage to her grave. Sophie placed white roses at the headstone, Little Claire added a drawing of an angel watching over a family. Daniel held my hand and watched with solemn eyes. Elena knelt in front of the grave, as she had done every Wednesday for so many years. "Thank you, Claire," she said, "for saving me, for trusting me with your family, for giving me a second chance at life, at love, at everything." She touched the silver locket at her throat. "I'll never be able to repay what you gave me, but I promise to keep trying, every day, for the rest of my life." A breeze stirred the branches above us, and the sun broke through the clouds, bathing us all in golden light. "That's her," little Claire said, with the certainty of a child who believes in magic. "That's Angel Claire saying hello." I looked at my family, at the life we had built from the ashes of loss, and I understood something that had taken me years to learn. Grief does not end. Love does not die. The people we lose remain with us, woven into the fabric of who we are, shaping our choices and guiding our paths in ways we may never fully understand. Claire Blackwell saved Elena's life on an ordinary Tuesday, and in doing so, she gave me the gift of a second chance. A chance to love again, a chance to build a family, a chance to honor her memory by living the fullest, richest, most compassionate life I could imagine. As we walked away from the cemetery that day, our children's laughter echoing across the quiet grounds, I made a silent promise to the woman I had loved and lost. I would never forget her. I would never stop honoring her memory. And I would spend the rest of my days proving that her sacrifice had not been in vain. Because that is what love does. It endures. It transforms. It carries us through the darkest nights and delivers us to unexpected dawns. And sometimes, when we least expect it, it brings a stranger to our door who turns out to be the answer to every prayer we have ever whispered in the silence of our broken hearts.